Thank you very much, and a very good morning to everybody, including the wonderful panelists who are on stage. I am so excited to be in conversation with Prajwal, Chris, and Bijoya, all of whom have very exciting new works to share with us. Prajwal is actually coming up with a new children's book, which will be published later this year. Chris just came out with with his debut novel, The Lost Author, with Penguin, which is available to buy. And Bijoya's work came out last year, Hill Songs of Love and Longing, all of which we're going to get deeper into today. Um, this session is particularly called Exploring the Art and Challenges of Short Story Writing. And we're going to do that. We're going to also talk about the joys of short story writing, why we do what we do, and what we keep off the page and don't want the reader to know. So I'm going to begin with asking you how you write. While I was on the flight on the way to GLF, I had, as usual, a huge suitcase, not befitting the number of days I was coming here for. I had a huge suitcase, and a writer next to me, Deepthi, had a very small suitcase. So I asked her, how do you do this? How do you pare it down? How do you pack so little? She said, I pack my clothes the way I edit my short stories, which is first I put everything in, and then slowly I pare it down to what's important. And I wondered if that's your approach to writing and editing short stories and to packing. And if not, how do you go about it? Briefly, I'd love to hear Bijoya.
Writing short story, yes, you're right. I'm always inspired by an incident or an anecdote or something or someone I meet. And then, this person and this incident keeps dancing in my mind saying, please write me down. So I start writing. Like, for example, the story Rosalind. It was inspired by my brother who went on a trek on the David Scott's trail. David Scott was a political English agent who sort of, came from the East India Company, and he used to trek from East Khasi Hills to West Khasi Hills. And my brother found a grave of a 5-year-old, and on the grave it was written, "Here lies camellia, sweet smelling primrose, fading timelessly." So that stuck in my mind, and I said, I have to immortalize the camellia somehow. So that's how I wrote Rosalind. So if you're talking about, yes, and I put all the details I could together and finally edited according to what I felt the reader would like to read about the little grave.
I love that. I love the origin of Rosalind. Thank you for sharing. Chris, how about you? What's your packing and writing style?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say thank you. It's so wonderful to be here with such amazing writers and see all these beautiful faces smiling at me. So thank you for being here. The way I approach short stories, I think, is similar to you, Bijoya, in that I will have these ideas sort of percolating in my mind, going round and round. And I think that flash of inspiration comes from when these two ideas meet.
Yes,
and there's
yes.
a confluence there. And then something new starts to arise out of these usually disparate things. And I think my approach, I like to speak of writing in terms of gardeners and architects. Do we grow the story over time, trimming it back like a gardener might, or do we meticulously plan in advance? And with short stories, and I'm interested to hear my other writers' thoughts on this as well. But with short stories, my approach is, I think, more one of a gardener, because the short story, it's obviously shorter than a novel. And I think if you approach a novel in the way a gardener approaches a story, you might get about 45,000 words in, and then the garden has grown out of control. So with short stories, I'd say more of a gardening approach. Yeah. What about you, Prajwal?
I love that. I'd love to know from Prajwal if you are an architect or a gardener, type A or type B.
I don't know what I am. I mean, I'd be lying if I told you I write stories because the stories in me that are bursting to come out. It's not that I sort of struggle with. I mean, Bijoya, you spoke about a character that just does not let go of you, and you're writing about it. Um, I I write fast and edit slow. I'm a vomiter. So the first 10 to 15 drafts, there's a lot of just vomiting words on the page, and then there's chiseling and chiseling and chiseling. So sculpting away. So a gardener or an architect, I'd say I'm a bit of a sculptor there. It's yeah.
Artists in every right, each of you. I love the approaches. Um, I actually want to get deeper into the works that I have read. Your story collections have been so much fun to read, and Chris, your works have been published online in such fantastic experimental journals. And I'll begin with a question for Prajwal and Bijoya at first. For I found a theme that sort of linked your story collections together. So, for context, Bijoya has two short story collections, Shadow Men and Hill Songs of Love and Longing. And these explore stories of women in Meghalaya. And Prajwal's short story collection, The Gurkha's Daughter, also explores the lives of people, Nepalese speaking people who are set in the Himalayan belt of India, Bhutan, and Nepal, Nepali speaking people. And yes, it's a very characterful collection that you both individually have put out together. And I wanted to ask you, George Saunders in his book, which is a book on craft, Swim in the Pond in the Rain, describes the short story as observing people and the turnings of their mind. And that's what a short story is what he says. Many of your stories hinge on a moment where a character almost acts on something. So they almost say something, they almost leave, they almost apologize, and then nearly don't. I am thinking in particular of Kali in your short story, The Cleft. I am thinking of Maui in The Flight. And in a way, we catch them at a point in which they are turning their mind, or we're observing the turnings of their mind before they take any decision. So I wanted to know how you decide what a character does after that moment of decision, of turning of the mind, of contemplation, or what they don't do. And how much is that internal reflection important in your short story writing? So, would either of you like to come in with that? Maybe Prajwal first?
Uh, See, when I write, I think I know what my characters are going to do. I am so confident that I know what they'll do. But then these characters sprout wings of their own and meander into territories I never intended for them to trespass. Okay? So perhaps this, what do you talk about? I mean, the fact that they almost do something is connected to the idea that I never intended for them to do anything. So it is, in a way, keeping a bit of agency for myself as a writer. But so many of my characters are people who may not have a voice, right? I like nothing better than writing about relationships between the haves and the have-nots. And I do think that when you're a person who lives with not that many freedoms in life, there's a lot of thinking about doing something, but not actually doing it. Does that make sense?
It does. I really like how you've linked it to where they come from and how context matters so much in agency, in what somebody can do, if they can leave, if they can take that decision in their life. And how about for you, Bijoya?
Um, I I write only of about the characters I know personally. And if you talk about shadow men, I met the militants before I wrote it, and all the characters, I met them or they've heard about them, or encounter them in some way, even in a dream. And after that, once I start writing, then I embellish, their experiences. And my main idea, actually, of writing, which really doesn't disturb my creative process, is that I write about a part of the country which nobody knows about. Like when I first went to college in Delhi, they said, "Oh, you come from Shillong or Ceylon." That time Sri Lanka was Ceylon. So I write these stories and I enjoy writing them. I go all over the place, but you'll notice that in every story, I have woven in something about the Khasi tradition, culture, mindscape, landscape. So yeah, that's how I write. I know all the people I've written.
That's so fascinating, and I see such difference in always different writers, different ways of approaching their craft. And in terms of those characters, is it then that you write their decisions or what they do on the page just as you have heard their stories, or do you sometimes imagine if they did something different than what they told you? Is it a space to make things up for you then on the
Pardon?
page? Do you tend to imagine if the real people that you met, if they did something differently, does your short story comprise that as well?
Yeah, I normally converse with them in my mind, and they decide what they want to do. Yeah.
So you have two versions of people
Yeah,
in
I
real
sort of
life.
I converse with them because I sort of already know them. So then I decide, okay, I also cheat a little to make the story interesting. I said, no, I'm not going to write that.
Very nice. It's our job as writers. Chris, so I want to ask you about your short story, which is a guide to recovery. I think it was shortlisted for the Kellogg Short Story Prize, if I'm not mistaken.
Won the short story, but yeah, yeah.
Oh, it won it. I'm so sorry. It was shortlisted for the Cambridge Prize. So it won that prize, and it just completely caught me off guard. Just your style of writing has, um, it veers away from realism entirely, unlike the stories we were talking about, which sometimes are rooted in a place, a time that we know or are getting to know. But your short stories sometimes go into the experimental, I have noticed, which is maybe they start with a second person or brings in elements of the speculative, the fabulous. I wanted to know your thoughts on the short story format, and does it allow for more experiments? What do you think about experimentation?
Yes, great question. It's hard for me to speak in terms of experimental fiction because it's kind of just what comes out. Um, and I suppose the stakes are lower with a short story because I'm not going to invest a whole load of time in the experiment, maybe. But I'm interested in the idea that form is never more than an extension of content. And so I like to reflect the content of my stories in the form which I choose. And so you mentioned A Guide to Recovery, which, broad summary, it's a love story about a zombie coming back from the dead and returning to the place where he experienced his first kiss. And it's written in the second person. And, zombies, they reach out, they're grasping. There's that rift there, that sense of longing. And it was actually a short story which I'd written after the pandemic as well. So we were all re-emerging from this chrysalis, and there was that sense of reaching out. And so I chose the second person there because it's a you. We're directing it outward. And I think maybe also we all might have felt slightly zombie-ish after the pandemic. So yeah.
Which is a theme that I do find running across your works in the most beautiful ways. You have to look for it sometimes. What is this character feeling? The you who becomes us. Are they lonely? And in turn, am I? So I love that in your work. Question follow up for the other two. Have you experimented with maybe format or voice or structure in your short fiction or maybe long fiction? Have you ever experimented?
You're not very unclear, actually.
Have you ever experimented with maybe the voice you use in your short fiction or the format or the structure? in your long or short fiction?
Well, the only thing I did, which was I've quoted people I really liked and who'd be, very much part of the story, like Bob Dylan in the stories about the militants. He was a clean-cut kid, but they made a kill out of him. So I quoted that, and one of Tagore in that very, very soppy romantic short story. But that's the only experiment I've done. Otherwise, I just write the way I write, yeah.
Yeah, I like experimenting. I employ ventricalizing. There is a story in The Gorkha's Daughter where uh, the entire conversation that happens between characters is in indirect speech. I mean, it makes for pretty labored reading, if you ask me, because there are no quotation marks anywhere. But I mean, it's been a fun story to write. And then I also do these sort of nudge, nudge, wink, wink things, which could be construed as masturbatory intertextuality. For example, all the characters in my first book somehow make an appearance in the second book when they have absolutely no reason to be there. So this is just my nudge, nudge, wink, wink to the very, very serious reader. Yeah, I enjoy experimenting. And I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons the book, my next book is actually a children's book. I mean, it doesn't help matters that I absolutely loathe children, but I mean, that's a story for another day.
Prajwal, you're very self-critical about these characters reappearing in other work, but that was chiming, I think, with what you were saying, Bijoya, about these characters who remain with you in your unconscious, and these are people that you know and you live with and you grow with and change.
Yeah, and once you write about them, they let you go. So you're free, Otherwise, they're there telling you, write my story, So that's how it goes, yeah.
Yeah, but Bijoya, if I mean, once you tell people you're a writer, and the first thing they say is, "Oh, you need to write about me." I mean, if we were to do that, like we would have the most inane characters in our books.
No, there's nobody inane because we can use our imagination and make that person so exciting that maybe then she won't be so happy because she won't recognize herself.
And you can have fake interviews with them in your mind. So that's a good way. I was once gifted a T-shirt and a mug, very on the nose, which said, "Don't be mean to me. I will write you in my next book." So in a way, you can use that as a threat on people, even if you're not quite going to use them. So we've spoken about your work, but how about we hear a little bit of your work? Just a bit. Maybe we can start with you, Chris. I would love to hear the opening to the story we were just talking about, the Road to Recovery, Guide to Recovery.
Sure, yeah, of course. So, as I say, this is told from the perspective of a zombie re-emerging and returning to the place where he experienced his first moment of intimacy. Starts like this. Push up. This needn't be done quickly, like in horror films. Instead, curl your fingers in the grass. Feel the dew on your palms. Emerge, inch by careful inch, nosing in the moss, remembering the smells, the sounds. Uncrust your eyes. Let the dirt fall away and watch the swaying yews for a while. You can use your headstone as a backrest.
Such a strong opening. With a lot of novels and sometimes with short stories, people take a while to usher you in. You're introduced to the story, you're offered a cup of tea, but not here. Push up, they say. You're right there in the story.
Yeah. The technique is in medias res. This is a form of Greek, storytelling. We start with a bang, hook you in. And you also see this in Netflix shows, by the way, in many Netflix shows. And I think we're approaching the point maybe where we might want to draw back from that technique, but it's certainly there.
So certainly you have to start with a bang now because the attention span also is little less for the setting of the scene. But yes, please tell me more about your technique of using openings, how you approach the openings of a story. Is this how it began, for instance, or did you edit it to come to this point?
So it depends story to story. But I think the way which we begin the tale, the end is in the beginning. So it tells you a lot. Just the opening line about where the story might go. But I think my approach, and I'd be interested to hear Bijoy and Prajwal your approach as well. But the first line is usually there for me as soon as I begin. But I've heard other writers, the final line will be there, and they'll write towards that final line. So I'd be interested to hear your approach. Do you start with a clear opening? Do you have a clear sentence which is defining of the story to you?
Chris, I normally relate more to the landscape. My first paragraph, I think you will also notice, it's got a description of the landscape, because I feel that the landscape affects the mind. And then I slowly, get into the story. It'll always be a small paragraph of the landscape around.
And it
That's
has
what
a
I
very beautiful cinematic quality in that very different, which is what I love about all of these voices, so different, but in that you do feel as though you're watching a film and you're being introduced to the place, time, how the sun is looking. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, and I think people emerge out of the landscape. So these are two very entwined things. And I mean, I write predominantly, because I live in Scotland, about the beautiful and grand and mysterious and wild Scottish landscape. But these are themes which I recognize in both of your works as well.
So I write mainly about the rural areas, and also the landscape, the environment, still very important to them, the ways of thinking. I don't really write about city folk. So that's how, that's what I mean. Yeah.
This is highly interesting to me. I mean, I come from the Himalayan foothills, all right? Perhaps one of the most beautiful regions in the world. But when I need to describe the landscape there, I clam up. Something happens to me. Okay, so much so that if I have to describe the Kanchenjunga in more than 3 or 4 words, I need to incorporate something strange, something bizarre in there. For example, she stared at the mountain changing hue while monkeys around her fornicated. Okay, I am such a dialogue-oriented person. It's the minute I come to some point in the story where there is an exchange happening between two people, the fingers just fly off the keyboard. All right, I become a more relaxed writer, and I start having a lot of fun. But I don't know. The Guardian alluded to something about the Gurkha's daughter when they reviewed it. I think the reviewer said something along the lines of, "No Himalayan ink is wasted on the beautiful landscape of where he comes from," and and. It's I hope I'm not misquoting John Garth, but it's fascinating to me. I am very familiar with Bijoya's works, and just how beautifully the landscape is woven into her works is what strikes me the most about your fiction. And I wish I could be that way, but I realize...
But you live in New York and Paris. It's very difficult for you.
Well, that is kind of true. Yeah, okay, sure.
I have noticed that Prajwal's stories have this charge, and that charge is completely it's dialogue, 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 but never in a way that you feel it's dense. In fact, dialogue does make the page seem lighter as a reader. You fly through the stories, through the gaps between what's said, what's unsaid, between the punctuation. It's really wonderful. The lack of punctuation sometimes when it's indirect dialogue, but yeah, I actually would love to hear if you have something to read out from maybe a bit of dialogue.
All right, so this will be short. Don't be leaving your seats just yet. All right, so this is an exchange between an employer and her helper. It takes place in Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal. The employer is Parvati, her servant, her helper is Kali, okay? That demon, Parvati said, smiling to herself, she's dead. She's dead, the girl echoed. Do you know what I'm even talking about, you foolish girl? Parvati gently hit the servant's hand. Yes, your mother, Kali replied. Not my mother, but my mother-in-law. Your name is Kali, you dark girl, and your brain is as dark as your face. You understand nothing. But you call her mother, don't you? Of course, I have to. What else would I call my husband's mother? My daughter? It's a good thing you found employment here, Kali. With the way you think, you'd be thrown out of everywhere else. Not to forget the way you look. Black as coal and those grotesque lips. Thank you.
So this is the cleft. This is the cleft. It's the opening story in his collection. And when I began reading it, and that's your introduction to Prajwal, to his world, because we are not our characters, it shocks you. You start instantly judging the characters, but it's wickedly funny, and I love that. And that's just a little snippet, and the whole story will change your mind about what you think about Parvati and about Kali. You will, in fact, the turnings of the mind, there are so many minds being turned, including us, the readers, as we will change our perspectives and get hints at their inner world. But tell me, what is it about dialogue that you enjoy? About what is it about the human condition that you can show via dialogue that no other craft tool can really help with?
Okay, I guess it all whittles down to my being a born eavesdropper. Is there anything more pleasant in life than sitting down next to a bickering couple and hearing the nuances of every one of their arguments, okay? And incorporating them into your story, incorporating it just seems to me like the most natural thing you can do. It is also, I mean, all of us have been writing for long enough now to know what our strengths and weaknesses are, right? Uh, uh, as I mentioned earlier, I become a nervous wreck the minute I have to waste Himalayan ink on describing the landscapes around me. But I'm guessing it's just reconciling yourself to the fact that you're a certain kind of a writer. Okay. Uh, I've done this thing where I've chatted with friends about some whatever and simply copy pasted the entire thing onto Microsoft Word and then chiseled away, and chiseled away to have 4 to 5 pages of dialogue. So I also am one of those writers very wary of turning people off. So I like all the blank space in my books that dialogue formatting engenders. So, okay, that was your public service announcement in favor of dialogue. It's a stylistic preference.
I know many readers who do prefer blank spaces and make it a lighter experience on the page, including my mother-in-law who's in the audience here. Speaking of, but that's fascinating to know. And I'd like to quickly move on to Bijoya and your work. If you could read us a passage of your choosing, um, and then I would like to ask you a question about that, about your prose style. If you read Bijoya's work, you'll find so um, you'll be in a safe net. You'll feel there's beautiful lyrical language as she's often described, but what's happening underneath the surface is she also has characters that do sometimes wicked things. But her prose is just so gentle and beautiful that it'll shock you. So, we'll just a little bit would be
I
great.
think you got the book.
Which book would you like?
Hillsong. Over romantic, but anyway, that's what the book is about. So this book of mine is Hill Songs of Love and Longing. And the last story is the saddest. And she loses her lover, her boyfriend, her husband to be in a crash. So she goes to Missouri, to this hill where they first met. And then she reads Tagore's lines. I think I shall stop startled if ever we meet after our next birth, walking in the light of the faraway world. I shall know those eyes then as morning stars, and yet feel that they have belonged to some unremembered evening sky of a former life. I shall know that the magic of your face is not all its own, but has stolen the passionate light that was in my eyes at some immemorial meeting, and then gathered from my love a mystery that has now forgotten its origin.
Isn't that beautiful? Thank you so much for reading that. And there's so much I can ask you, but maybe just if you could share how you write, how do you play with language and rhythm so well in your writing, where it somewhere feels like it falls between poetry and prose? Is it conscious or it's just the kind of writer you've always been? Do you enjoy reading poetry, perhaps?
Yeah, I think I'm a closet poet. Because, like I can't really, I'm not confident to write poetry, but what I feel comes out in my prose. So that's why it's been called a lyrical prose and all that. And I like reading my work sometimes and say, oh, wow, is that me? You know? So it comes very naturally to me. Yeah.
I love that. I was watching a session 2 days ago with two Irish novelists and an Indian one, and it was all about novel writing. And each of them shared how they got to writing the novel, and they said things like, "Oh, I couldn't write poetry, so I wrote a novel. I couldn't write short stories, so I wrote a novel." And they very much concluded in a very sweet, self-deprecating way of failed short story writers become novelists. Do you think that that the inverse is true, which is that failed novelists become short story writers? I don't think so. All of you have written a novel each. What do you think is the difference between the two forms of writing?
Well, Chris, do you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah. I think it depends writer to writer, the difference. But of course, when you're approaching a short story, there is this, I think there's a question at the heart of a short story. And that question, as a writer, you approach it through imagery, through metaphor, through feeling. At least this is my approach. Whereas with a longer form, there's the plot, and I think it's harder to sustain a reader's attention with metaphor and feeling throughout that extended plot. And that's why my favorite writers tend to blend the two. You spoke about lyrical prose. That's just something I love. And something which I think both the writers to either side of me might share is this reveling in the unsaid. Prajwal's dialogue, the space left. What are the characters saying beneath the words? And Bijoya, the lyricism, the mystery which you invoke. There's something unsaid, something intangible, but something we can sense beneath that poetry. And I think maybe short stories might be better at saying the unsaid. That's just my personal opinion. I'd be interested to hear yours.
I think we should not compare the two. And I don't like short stories to be looked down upon as a kind of a jump towards a bigger work, as they say. Because short story is a genre of its own, and it's a very important part of the literary world. Because it sends the message much faster. Like if I experience something, I would like to share it. I would like to share it if it's a joyful experience, a sad experience, an inspiring experience. And I think a short story is the best way to do it. because a novel can divert you from what you're trying to say, because there's so many more characters. And the guy who really, the writer, sorry, not guy, the writer who really influenced me was a French writer, and I think Prajwal will correct my spelling, Guy de Maupassant, right? Yeah, Guy de Maupassant. If you ever read The Necklace, you'll be amazed, and I think all of you will become short story writers. It influenced me so much that I don't know, it stayed with me, and I decided, okay, if I ever write, I'll begin with short stories. Yeah.
I could not agree more. Short stories are a form in their own right, and thank you for saying that, Bijoya. A lot of people do think of short stories being the stone that you
Yeah.
first like dip into, but it's actually quite a difficult craft to conquer.
I actually think the short story is the superior of the genres between the short stories and novels.
Yeah.
Okay, when I attempted the stories in The Gurkha's Daughter, I approached them from a place of ignorance. I had no idea that short story collections would be, that the stepdaughterly treatment would be meted out on short story collections, especially by publishers in the West. Apparently, the short story has been dead since 1959. There's a year for that, 1959. One would think that the busier people got, the more of stories they would read, but that's not the case. To this day, it is very difficult for a debut author to embark on a publishing journey with a short story collection because publishers insist on novels. And I think that's the reason a lot of us writers do not write short stories, because why risk why risk a difficult publishing journey? Bringing a short story to a resolution is so difficult. Saying whatever you need to say in a certain number of words is hard work.
Yeah, it's hard
You
work.
can
Yeah.
you have so much room to play around in a novel. So yes, I naively thought that starting a collection of short stories would be easier because a novel would be too vast a jungle to penetrate. But boy, how wrong I was. And after the 8 stories in The Gorkha's Daughter, writing the novel felt like the easiest thing in the world, honestly.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have a bit much larger, space to play with. With the short story, it has to be tight, it has to be bang on, and you can't divert, because if the reader gets diverted, he's going to say, "Oh, I'm not going to read the story." So I was very happy when Alice Munro won the Nobel Prize for Literature, right, Prajwal? And also Banu Mushtaq, her short stories. So I think it's come to its own, and I'm very happy.
Yes, glad to hear that it is winning huge prizes because that makes them more publishable, more sellable to publishers. And yeah, ultimately, I know there are many readers of short stories. It will reach the right readers. And yeah, no space for extra fluff trimming or excess baggage in short stories. So I suppose we only have 5 minutes, and I'd like to open this up to audience questions. If anybody would like to ask something, please raise your hands. Otherwise, I have, yeah, the lady in green in the front row, please.
Thank you so much for a great session. You've mentioned a few authors already, but I would love to hear more about short fiction authors that you admire and what particular aspects of their work you might be inspired by.
So as far as short story writers go, I think Danial Manunuddin, a Pakistani-American writer whose works you can read in The New Yorker, is extraordinary. He wrote a short story collection called In Other Rooms, Other Wonders. I also think Jhumpa Lahiri is a very gifted short story writer. And then there's George Saunders for me. So these are the contemporary writers.
So I think my favorite short story writer might be Jorge Luis Borges. His collection Labyrinths is incredibly inspirational and influential to me. This idea that he approaches short stories confronting these ideas at the frontier of physics, but he brings that emotive side to them. There's this wonderful quote by Emerson: "Time is what eternity looks like when viewed by the mind." And I think time as a subject to write about is so fascinating, and how it coincides with love. And Jorge Luis Borges, I think, is a writer who does that masterfully. And if you want a particular short story by him to check out, The Garden of Forking Paths.
I don't have a favorite author, but I've really enjoyed so many short stories from different authors: Russian, English, American, South American. So I don't have a favorite. I have favorite stories.
Just to add, sometimes really experimental or interesting and new things are online also. So looking out for journals online that publish short fiction and focus on it is a way to get a sense of newer voices that are not able to get through that jungle of publishing and get a collection published. But yeah, great recommendation.
May I add something? Sorry, Bhavika has a wonderful short story that was just published in Granta. What is the title of the story?
Folding Your Mother.
Look it up. It's a great story.
Okay, there are two hands raised here and one hand raised here. We have 5 minutes, so maybe if we go through it quickly. Okay, we'll begin here.
Yeah, hi. A wonderful panel. I have my favorite short story writer sitting right here. And I want to say that the most difficult thing for a writer is to find economy in words. And that is what you guys do so well, because you encapsulate an entire experience in those few pages. And each story that I've heard so far, all your excerpts, have me hooked. Absolutely hooked. And I'm going to go back and read your books and pick up your short stories. Great work. And thank you for talking about short stories. So important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for the panel. I am really curious actually as to how you guys put your collections together, because there's this piece of advice floating around in MFA land about how your collection should read like they're cut from the same cloth. Do you subscribe to that? And if yes, what is the cloth? Is it thematic? Is it stylistic? And if you don't subscribe to that, then how do you make your stories deviate from each other?
And maybe Bijoya or Prajwal, if you'd like to. The question is how collections can be put together.
See, it was quite easy for me because this is a collection about the Nepali-speaking world, right? So Nepalis in Bhutan, in India, in Sikkim, and so one could say that the theme there was common language. Okay. It doesn't have to be that way. Bijoya, what do you think?
Yeah, we'll just answer this quickly and then the session will end.
Actually, I have one theme, and it's for Hills of Love and Longing. It's really about love and longing. So it was very easy. But there's just one story which, I just had to write. So that is about the man who killed his beloved wife and why he did it. But otherwise, it's very easy to arrange because my theme in all the books is about women and their secret lives, their longings. So it hasn't been difficult for me at all.
Thank you so much for sharing that, all of you. And thank you for the most wonderful answers to my questions. George Saunders said, when you read a short story, you fall a little more in love with the world around you. And I think we all felt that this morning. So thank you so much for being a great audience as well. Thank you, JLF and Vivek. And the author's books shall be available at the stall behind you. Please purchase copies. They are fantastic and you can get them signed as well.